Hello again, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about gerunds. Now, gerunds are kind of a confusing subject, which cause a lot of trouble for a lot of language learners, but I think by the end of this lesson, they won't be a problem for you. So, what is a gerund? Well, let's look at some examples. I can say, for example, reading, swimming, walking, or dancing. So here, the gerund is just the ing form of a verb, right? Kind of. The gerund may look very similar to something we've also talked about, the present participle. However, you should not confuse them. They are not the same, even though they look the same, and they do not have the same function. Now, we should also say that gerunds have two forms that we will talk about today, nominal and verbal forms. Now, to be more precise, I'd like to focus on the nominal character of a gerund. Now, to begin, the gerund can form the subject, verb, or the object or the predicative of a sentence. Like in the examples, swimming is my favorite kind of sport, or I like making people happy, and finally, the duty of mankind is doing good. Also, gerunds can be preceded by prepositions. Just like in the example, I'm really tired of dancing. And third, gerunds can be modified by nouns and pronouns. Do you have any objections to visiting Granny? Also, they can be used as part of a compound noun, where the person or the thing denoted by the gerund does not normally perform the function. Put more simply, it describes the purpose of this object. For example, walking shoes, shoes that I can walk in, or a swimming costume, or a dancing hall. Now, to compare a gerund with the participle, in the participle, the person or the thing expressed by the noun is the one who performs the action. For example, a dancing girl. Here it is the girl who is dancing. But if I say my dancing shoes, it's my shoes for dancing. I certainly hope that my shoes themselves are not the ones that are dancing. That would be bad. So, let's turn to the verbal character of gerunds now. A gerund of a transitive verb is the direct object. For example, I've made great progress in learning English. The gerund can also be modified by an adverb. She burst out crying bitterly. And since we're talking about forms of the gerund, I would like to bring your attention to this table. Now, just like in the present participle, the same forms appear for the gerund. We have simple and perfect, as well as active and passive. For the verb do, the active simple is doing, the simple passive being done, the perfect active having done, and the perfect passive having been done. This is a very common difference between British and American English. British English will commonly use the perfect forms of the gerund, whereas American English prefers the simpler forms, or the simple forms. However, it really is just a preference thing, usually. So now, let's look at some examples using each of these. For the active simple, I like inviting my friends. But for the passive simple, I like being invited to parties. I myself like to be invited by other people. And in the perfect forms, I remember having told you about it. And I remember having been told about it. The difference here is that in the second, I, the subject, was told. Now, the gerund must be used after all of these verbs: avoid, admit, burst out, consider, deny, dislike, enjoy, fancy, feel like, finish, give up, can't help, go on, keep on, mind, postpone, put off, stand, suggest, and many more. So now let's look at some examples where we use gerunds. She avoided eating junk food. Here, eating is what she avoided. It forms the object of the verb. She avoided eating. The second, he suddenly burst out laughing. Again, burst out laughing. Laughing forms the object. What did he burst out doing? He burst out laughing. Third, I don't enjoy getting up early in the morning. Again, the gerund is providing more information. I don't enjoy what? I don't enjoy getting up early. Also in the sentence, or the question, do you feel like dancing? Also, have you finished reading the book? Here, I'm asking what you feel like or what you have finished doing. And we use the gerund to do this. A few more examples. We couldn't help laughing at Bob. Or go on talking. She didn't mind him smoking. I can't stand listening to such loud music. And they suggested meeting at 5 o'clock. Now, in all of these examples, we used the gerund to provide more information or to express what I want you to avoid or what I am suggesting. We can also create sentences using subordinate clauses with that to mean the same thing in many cases, not all, but many. Like in the example, they suggested that we meet at 5 o'clock, or he admitted that he made a mistake. And here, that is optional. You could just as easily say, he admitted he made a mistake. However, if we use that in a subordinate clause, we should not use the gerund. We should simply say, usually in the past tense. However, you should also note that if we make a subordinate clause using that, we never use the gerund. There are also a lot of verbs with prepositions after which we use the gerund. Now, please look at the screen and you'll see a few examples of them. Now, pay special combination to the word combinations to object to look forward to, or to be, or to get used to something. These are also used with gerunds, and they can also be used with gerunds. Don't let the ing after to fool you. So let's look at some examples of using gerunds with these phrases. First, he insisted on being treated in an appropriate way. Another, he was accused of stealing money. Next, they apologized for being late. Another, I would like to complain about not being treated with certain consideration. And one more, I look forward to hearing from you soon. These are all normal phrases and these are all correct phrases. So we can use the gerund after a preposition or after a verb phrase with a preposition. The following predicative word groups also use the gerund. To be aware of, to be busy, to be incapable of or to be capable of, to be fond of, to be guilty of, to be indignant at, to be pleased at, to be proud of, to be surprised at, to be astonished at, to be worth, or to spend time. And let's look at some examples using these. First, we were busy decorating the Christmas tree. Next, he isn't capable of doing such a thing. Third, Anne is fond of embroidery. Fourth, I was surprised at receiving a present from him. And 5, this book is worth reading. Now, I'd like you to memorize some groups of words after which gerunds are used. The first example, this car needs repairing. Now, here, I could also say this car needs to be repaired, but we'll discuss that in a later lesson. Next, the Museum of Modern Art is worth visiting. Next, the father is for buying a new car. And a fourth example, I'm not against going to the sea. Here, the words need, require, to be worth, to be for, or to be against are used with a gerund following them. Also, she couldn't help crying, or we can't afford buying it. Here, the phrases can't help or can't afford are likewise used with a gerund. And one more set, it's no use arguing and it's no good talking any more about it. The phrases it's no use, it's useless, and it's no good are all also used with gerunds. Next, we use gerunds very often to talk about sport and leisure activities as well. For example, let's go climbing next week. Or another example, would you like to go dancing tonight? We can also use by with a gerund to show how something is done, by what method or by what means it is done. So let's look at some examples. They made their money by buying and selling cars. Here, it's the method by which they made their money. Another example, you can find out the meaning of new words by looking in the dictionary. Here, it gives you more information on how to find out this new information. We can also use for with a gerund to indicate the purpose of something. It tells us about the use, and we usually just say for, followed by a gerund. Like in the examples, the special material is for gluing fabrics. Here, I'm learning about the purpose. And in another example, the telephone was invented for communicating between people at a very long distance. Here, for communicating, it's expressing the purpose. Now we also have the phrase on doing something, or on with a gerund, which is used to mean when or as soon as something happens or has happened. Like in the expressions, on arriving home yesterday, I found out that I had left my phone in the office. Here, I find out when I arrive home. I've walked in the door, and at that moment I say, oh, I don't have my phone. Or, in another example, on hearing the fire alarm, leave the building immediately. In this case, I'm giving you a command, or a very, very strong suggestion, that if you hear the fire alarm, you should leave at that moment, at the moment you hear it. Now, finally, I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that gerunds can be used following nouns in the possessive case, or following possessive pronouns. Now, let's see some examples of this to show you how it works. I insisted on her visiting the doctor. They complain of my being absent-minded. Here, we're using it to talk about actions or qualities that someone else owns. My, or ourselves own. My, being late, on her visiting. So, in conclusion, there are a lot of cases where we have to use the gerund, and it's used to do a lot of different things in the English language. Now, in a later lesson, we'll be comparing the gerund with the infinitive, so don't worry too much about that yet. For now, I just want you all to learn and review all of the different ways which we use the gerund. I personally recommend that you review this lesson at least once and maybe a few more times. Good luck. I'll see you in the next lesson.